Good morning. As Carl said, I get the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we found in public awareness and during our inspections. And I just wanted to, can I just hit the arrow?
Yeah, up or down.
Okay, didn't jump too fast. Just touch quickly on the history of inspections. We started back in 2011. We were mandated to inspect all of the public awareness programs, and Christy and a team she put together developed the inspection process and inspection forms and all. So PHMSA was mandated to have all of ours done by December 31st of 2012, and the states are still in that process, and their mandate is for December 31st of 2013. So if there's a quick effort going on out there, if somebody notices some inspection work going on, that's what's driving some of that at the state level. What I wanted to do is just talk briefly. I did want to hit not only what we found and what the issues were, but I kind of wanted to show some of the results. And you can see here, I thought it was important to talk about this. We did a total of 258 inspections that were led by PHMSA personnel. And many of those inspections involved other state inspectors or other regions, and we may have had several regions involved on our large operators. But this is kind of where we ended up. And as you can see, the NOAs, the NOPVs, the compliance orders are things that required the operator to change their program and report back, change it to an acceptable level, or make some effort and improvement in their program and report that back. So I think that's important to understand. It wasn't just to go out and look at them. We actually worked to foster improvement in these programs. And it was very important for us to do that while we were there, not to just give a rubber stamp, as so often we're accused of sitting in the coffee shop or something. But we did physically look at those. Just to give you an idea, the inspection plan, we took Christy and her group took 1162. And 1162, although it's an API, American Petroleum Institute process, if you remember back, when they were in the process several years ago of renewing that standard, and PHMSA went to them and said, hey, we've got this stuff we've done with the TRB, Transportation Resource Board back in '87, and other things that we've done, and we've got this effort that we want to do. So API brought in and allowed to get the AGA and INGA and some of the other, the gathering line folks and stuff to look at and be a part of that. So it was broadened to cover all of that. So it wasn't just something that API threw together. There was a lot of effort from other industry people that were involved in creating that, and PHMSA folks as well. And I'm not sure how much of the general public, it was quite a ways ago, and I don't remember exactly the details on who else was put in there. But the four major sections, we tried to break it down. Do you have a plan, a complete plan, and then are you implementing the plan properly, and then are you doing an implementation, an annual review of all of those things you're supposed to do each year, and then do you do an effectiveness evaluation? Have you got this process that does that at least once every 4 years? So as we went through it, we were able to take and look at each section and say, okay, here's what we've got, here's what you need to, and we looked for some of the key things, and we said, okay, we set a benchmark and said if 20% of an item was unsatisfactory, then we wanted to look further at that item. And so you can see there was a couple in section 1 that were big items that we looked at. As you look at it, the stakeholder identification was one of them. Sometimes the operators missed getting the right parts of the audience. Maybe they left out part of the excavators, or they left out part of the emergency responders, or in some group or some way that they didn't establish it properly. Or maybe they didn't do the user integrity management program to look at it. If they only did 660 and the PIR for that pipeline is 1,000 or 1,100 foot, then they need to expand that. So those were PIRs, the potential impact radius, which is some of the integrity management jargon for identifying when if you're in a HCA or an unusual sensitive area for natural gas. Now, on the liquid side, it would have been they'd be looking at overland flow characteristics or vapor dispersion ratios and activities or something along that nature. And then did they have a written plan that had all of the stuff in it, and meaning year after year consistency? Did they have the annual implementation review and the 4-year effectiveness evaluation? They have those processes there to work on. In Section 2, again, you can see there were 3 questions that were above 20% that we looked at. And one of them was English and other languages, where did they have a process to determine when to have alternate languages and a way to determine what alternate languages to have? Were they making sure that that what's required in 1162 is in the plan, and that everything in the plan is in their baseline message? So did they do this mapping process to say, okay, here's what's required, here's what I've got in my plan, here's what I've got in my brochure? Does all of that match? And then on your emergency response plans, is that available to emergency officials? How are you doing that? And many times it was verbal at a meeting. Well, if I didn't come to the meeting, how do you get it to me? So people had to change their plans and the way they did things to do that. And I think one of the other big ones was the supplemental process, making sure that in the supplemental process there was an effort to catch pockets of languages. Minneapolis has a Hmong population that the landowner started renting 5-acre plots of land. Well, guess where those 5-acre plots of land were? Right over the pipeline. So they had a language issue that they had to work on to solve that. Schools is another one that needs to be in that supplemental process. Having schools that touch the right-of-way, almost every school's evacuation plan is to dump the kids right out on that big open right-of-way. So there needs to be an interaction and understanding that this is not always a good deal. I had a lady in Chicago, one of our public awareness ladies up there that for the pipeline operator, and she listened to me 3 or 4 years ago. She came to me 2 years ago and said, you know, I'm glad I talked to you and listened to you when you said that. I said, why is that? She said, I have 2 schools. And she said, I went and met with them, talked to them, and when I got done, I said, okay, in an emergency, what are you going to do with the kids? And they said, we're going to put them right out on the right-of-way. So it took her quite a bit of effort to get that through to them, that you need to change that. Collaborative messages, that's another one, getting that balance between the collaborative message and the operator-specific information. And in the collaborative efforts, a lot of the operators have now gone to adding operator-specific information, leaflets and things, to get who do you call and who do you contact and where's my pipeline and who's local that I can talk with and whose pipeline is it and what's in that pipeline and what are those characteristics. So that's out there. I think the other thing I'd like to mention before I go any further is that in Section 2 we talk about, and I do a lot of work with pipeline associations and emergency responders, and I try to make sure that the pipeline associations understand they have obligations to give information to the emergency responder. We don't have anything in our regulations that says that emergency responder has to listen. But when I'm talking, I have 5 items that I tell emergency responders they need to be working with the operator and getting. If they're not getting them, they need to be letting me know. They need to know where the location of that pipeline is. They need to be using NPMS before they get into an issue or emergency, so they know what they've got. They need to know who operates that local pipeline. They need to know what's inside that pipeline. They need to know where the valves are. How long is it going to take to close those valves? And they need to know what the worst case scenario is. What's going to happen along that pipeline if something ruptures or fails? Where's the worst thing? Really? I knew it was going to be difficult to boil this down into a short period of time, but I'll shoot through these last ones. Section 3 is just simply having the plan. Do you have an implementation? Do you have a plan, and are you monitoring and implementing that plan appropriately? And do you have an annual process to review that and make the changes that are needed there? And are you doing those changes in time? And then I'll jump to section 4. And you can see really in section 4, almost every one of them was above 20%. And what it tells me is the operators did a very good job of getting a plan written, getting that plan implemented, trying to get the effectiveness or the implementation going and understanding that review process to make sure they're doing it right. But then on the effectiveness side, many of our smaller operators didn't understand what effectiveness was. So we spent a lot of time educating them, helping them understand that process and what they needed to do and what they needed to know. So you can see, I've got a little wiggle room? Yeah. Okay, all right. You can see here, many of the operators, we found a lot of good things going on with the operators. We found some issues. We found it places. And the advantage we had was after seeing 45 programs and inspecting 44 programs, you have the ability to draw knowledge from different operators and say, okay, here's something you need to think about. Here's something else you need to think about. Here's how you might consider doing that. Here's the way other people are doing it. So it gives you that fostering improvement was very effective and very fortunate to have that process. But and in section 4, are they summarizing their conclusions? Are they doing their effectiveness? Are they doing the right measurements? Do they understand what responses are versus the number of surveys they sent out? Do they understand how to figure what size audience that they have to survey and responses they have to have? And all of the other things that go with that process to make sure they have a valid sampling and a valid process to make it work. So that's, so what did we find? And just to run through it quickly, we found that most operators have developed and implemented their public awareness programs. They did a good job getting them started. There was definitely room for improvement, and I think this process has caused a lot of improvement to occur. The process methodology improvements needed with annual audits, effectiveness evaluations was where the greatest improvement needed. There's a challenge is motivating stakeholders to stop, listen, and change. And there's no doubt about that, whether it's emergency responders or excavators or the general public, affected public, it's a challenge. And the thing is that the affected public, by definition, is only a short corridor along the pipeline. And there's a lot of other people outside of that that want to know about pipelines. So how do you get that knowledge out there as well? We have in the Midwest about 10 or 11 different pipeline associations out of our 12 states that we deal with that have associations, statewide associations that try to work on public awareness, and mostly emergency responders and public officials. But they're constantly talking about other things as well. And so we're working with those people trying to give them. And how do you balance that information overload with specific messages? How do you get to emergency responders with information when they've got all of this other training and information and stuff coming at them from other directions that they have to listen to? So those are the challenges I think are still out there that we saw. So thank you.
Thank you, Harold.